may know him from Twitch, where he is a dominant competitive NHL eSports player. It's also possible you've seen his hockey analysis and satire on Twitter, where he has now been tweeting for 11 years. So happy 11-year anniversary. June 2015 is where he started. Most recently, he started his latest venture as a writer, and the reviews are already in. Grady Sass, the content director and producer of the Nation Network, says Big Tree Sap is up for Writer Rookie of the Year on Canucks Twitter. Dave Hall of Canucks Army and friend of the show exclaimed, "A great read. Excited to watch the journey and see where it leads, my friend." And Thomas Drance of The Athletic and Sportsnet 650 tweeted out, "He is a really promising Canucks analyst, damn good writer with some compelling insights, and he's just starting regular publishing his works in long form on his own site." So welcome to the show, Sapsterr, my dude.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to be here. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Um, I mean, lots of people already know you. You're obviously, like I talked about Twitter, you're huge on Twitter. So everyone's always digging into that. And I know people have been yelling at you for years now to start doing your own writing. So it's good to see you're finally doing that.
Yeah, it's been an interesting week. I actually so when we started discussing this, I think I only had like 1,700 followers, and this was I don't know, like I know you sent me a DM a while ago, and I here's the thing, I might have been tweeting on Twitter for 13 years. I didn't hit like 100 followers until maybe 2 years ago. So there's a progression, right? I didn't know that there was this like a separate inbox for like requests. So I never saw your DM. So I want to say this maybe a month or two ago. And then yeah, in the last week since since I posted my first article, I've gotten another 1,000 followers. So it's been kind of a whirlwind.
Must be very cool too, because obviously we're all Canucks fans and we're all reading stuff from these guys like Dave Hall and from Thomas Drance. So to have those guys kind of reach out on Twitter must have been a pretty cool experience for you.
Yeah. So again, like whirlwind is probably the best way to describe it because it's I'm not saying like I've had any like beef with Thomas Drance, but it's I've not always agreed with him. Like I acknowledge how intelligent he is, but it's not like, it's like 100% of the time I'm like, yes, I agree with him. And I think part of what makes his endorsement of my writing more the reason why I appreciate it more is because I know he doesn't always agree with what I say. So I know there's less bias there. Not that there would be to begin with, but it's not just for me, it's also for other people who might, see his endorsement and they might be like, oh, maybe, maybe Sapsterr just or Edward, I guess, just, hypes him up in the comments. That's not always the case. So seeing that was pretty cool. I've gotten some DMs from some people within the game as well that have I don't know if they'd want their names out there, so I guess I won't say them, but it's it's been nice and I appreciate it. It's not even like, oh, I appreciate them for following me. It's I appreciate literally everyone who's ever followed me or interacted with my stuff. Like even if I don't agree with you, it's cool because I acknowledge fandom is irrational. So what, you and I might, not see eye to eye on, like that's fine as long as it doesn't get too personal or whatever. I think it's cool to have that dissent and be able to discuss the game because at the end of the day, all that we really want as Canuck fans is a team that wins.
Yeah. So let's talk. We always like to get kind of everyone's story about how they became a Canucks fan here on Nothing is Perfect. So where did it really start for you and your Canucks fandom?
Mm. So um, my mom was 17 when she had me. So she was a very like young mother and you know like I think about it now, I'm 25. So if I had a child at my mom's age, that child would be 8. And I know as a matter of fact that current me could not handle an 8-year-old child, especially if that 8-year-old child were anything like me. So with that being said, my mom didn't make the probably the most data driven parenting decisions, and one of those, well, along with my dad, but one of those was putting me in front of video games at a young age. So I've been playing video games since I was like 3 years old, as long as I can remember. But what I would remember is that I'd be playing video games in front of the TV, and my dad would come in and just turn them, like, he wouldn't turn off the console. He'd be like, pause your game. I'm watching hockey. And I'd get really upset about it, cry and stuff. Um, and then eventually I was just like, well, there's nothing I can, you know, of course I didn't think about this rationally, but eventually my body or my brain was just like, well, you can't really control it. Dad wants to watch hockey, might as well watch it. And then, you kind of get interested in it. I remember some vivid memories like along the way, or like uh, stuff like I originally thought hockey players were on rollerblades. So for the first 2 years, for some reason, I thought they were on rollerblades, and there was a conversation because eventually my mom and my dad split up, and it was my mom and my stepdad I lived with, and I remember bringing that up. I'm like, "Do you remember when NHL players used to play on rollerblades?" I was like maybe 6 or 7, and my stepdad was like, "They've never done that." Just stuff like that. Or I remember the first full season I actually like paid attention to heavily was the 08-09 season, and the Canucks opened up that season with like a 6-0 win against Calgary. That's one heck of a way to start your fandom, is with a win like that. And then I think the following season we like the opening game we like lost in Calgary. I want to say it was either 2-0 or 2-1. And then, you watch the playoffs enough. The first full playoffs I watched, Canucks sweep St. Louis in 4 games. Alex Burrows with the OT winner with like a minute left in overtime. And then, losing to the Blackhawks, but like back-to-back years. And then I was at game 7 against the Bruins with my mom. I guess I learned at a young age that hearts do get broken. But yeah, like my fandom is deeply rooted in. My mom's not really like a Canuck fan. She was a Habs fan because my nana, who was born in 1913 in Sturgeon Falls, Ontario, she spoke French primarily through her upbringing. So she was a Montreal Canadiens fan. And because my mom wasn't really a hockey fan, she just kind of shifted over to being a Habs fan. But my dad and my stepdad are Canuck fans, so it's that's kind of where it started. And then video games as well helped amplify that and got me more interested in like numbers and stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting how a lot of the generations of Canucks fans have gotten their start on that 94 run, the 2011 run, where it's like, hey, maybe this can happen every year. But as Canucks fans, we learned very quickly that it probably doesn't happen every year.
No, it 3 times in 55 seasons. Meanwhile, I mean, Vegas has made the conference finals more in their existence than the Canucks have. It's it would be funny if it wasn't so sad.
Hey, at least we're undefeated.
Yeah, 3-0. There's so many weird stats about like the Canucks in that way, like undefeated in conference finals or third rounds, I guess. And we hold the record for most Stanley Cup final appearances without a win or without a finals win, most individual cup final games won without a cup final win. The only team in NHL history to go to 2 game 7s of the final and not win. I think we're one of the only teams to never win a cup or draft first overall. Like there's so much. It's kind of funny, and it does play into like the team's curse narrative, and I'm not like a big believer in stuff like that. So to me it's kind of funny that there is something that can actually play into that narrative.
Yeah, definitely does something to the psyche. Looking back on your Canucks fandom, is there like a singular moment that really stands out as like that was like my favorite moment in watching this team, where I just couldn't believe what was happening before my eyes?
Probably the either the Ryan Kessler goal against Nashville where he walked Shane O'Brien and Shea Weber, but it was mostly O'Brien. Um, or the it would be easy to say the stanchion goal against San Jose,
Mhm.
but I think I remember my stepdad and I went to one of his buddies' houses for game 2, and I was dealing with like stomach problems. So I was in and out of the washroom. I was like 10 years old. But I remember coming out of the washroom and then seeing BX on that breakaway where he snipes at 5-hole in Niemi. And I was like, oh, like this is serious, because Canucks were about to go up 2-0 on the Sharks. And if I recall, the narrative going into that series was like, okay, they got past Chicago, they kind of were unable to score against Nashville. Like, how are they going to do against a San Jose team that had been to the conference finals and just never really got over the hump? Like, was it the Sharks' time to take that next step? And then the Canucks kind of just trounced them. Game 3, they lost handedly. I remember listening to that over the radio coming home from Newton Wave Pool. Yeah, no, like the other games, like there's other moments like Game 4, Canucks are up. I want to say it was 3-0 at the time. Henrik Sedin wins the faceoff back. Hamhuis rims it. Canucks get a 2-on-1 and Henrik Sedin backhand passes it 5-hole through Niemi to Burrows. Like as a kid, I don't know how you don't fall in love with a team when you see like oh, you hear like, oh, 5-hole goals or whatever, right? Like, shoot 5-hole on a breakaway, goalies have a hard time. But then for a player to like be so creative like Henrik Sedin and not go through the 5-hole as a way to score, but to distribute the puck to someone else to score, like that blows your mind as a kid. Like you can do that in a video game, at least not at the time, right? So when you see stuff like that, it's just like, whoa, like this really is the coolest sport on the planet, and like this is my team. This will last forever. No.
So out of all the moments, then was there like a singular player that you really felt that was your You just like moved back and forth?
It's a collection of moments,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I guess for me, like, so I didn't discover I had ADHD until I was like 23, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think now I understand why it was hard for me to like necessarily connect with like single moments in time, because like they would pass, right? It's so much easier for me to connect with like series of moments within a certain time frame.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about the video game side of things too, because you mentioned that's something you started at a very young age. What was the first NHL EA Sports game that you played? Was it like, would that have been like 2005 or something like that?
Yeah, 2004.
2004.
Yeah, that's what I remember playing. Like my dad would just sit me down. My dad still has images that he's transferred from, phone to phone to phone of me like beating like the rookie AI like 90-0.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like the rookie AI, like it should be easy, but also like I'm 3 years old and I would not to like not to take a Luongo quote, like pump my own tires here, but I don't think a lot of 3-year-olds would be able to do that.
No.
I don't know. I guess I didn't. It wasn't until like later on looking back on it, I'm like, oh yeah, that is kind of like weird, like in a funny way, but like kind of like like you're just beating up AI. Like I remember the first online video game I played. It wasn't NHL. It was WWE SmackDown versus Raw 2007. It was like the first time that I was able to play online games, because like I had just gotten an Xbox 360.
Mm-hmm.
First online match, like I don't know what the skill level of my opponent was because I was 6, right? But I just beat this guy relentlessly. I'm like Rey Mysterio against like some super heavyweight John Bradshaw Layfield, and I just trounce him to the point where he leaves. And it's like 6-year-olds, one, probably shouldn't be playing online video games. Two, also shouldn't be beating teenagers or adults in those games. Mm-hmm. So it's video games have always kind of been, part of my life in that way.
So what point did you take that jump from just playing for fun to actually sitting down and playing competitively?
So it was weird because like I always knew I was like good at NHL, but I had never like taken that the initiative of like I wasn't aware of the community that was at large. So yeah, like I played online games, but I wasn't like I never had a computer, like my own computer. So I was never someone to like hop online. And yeah, like I think you said that I've been tweeting since 2015.
2015.
That was like on my phone at school. So when you're on your phone at school, you're not necessarily going on like Google and like looking up stuff. Like that's more like a home computer or laptop activity. I just never really had that. And then I was scrolling Twitter one day. I want to say it was 2019. So this would have been like right after I graduated. Yeah, it was right after I graduated high school, which was right before COVID. And I saw the Canucks were running a tournament called the Canucks Shell Challenge. And I was like, okay, like might as well. Like it's just, oh, I think this is cool. Yeah, so I do that and I qualify in the fourth qualifier. And little did I know, like I had heard of like the NHL Gaming World Championship that had gone on, and I just wasn't really aware of how, one, to get into it, and two, I always had this weird thing where like, like not to get too personal, I found out through like cognitive behavior therapy that the reason why like I get mad at losing at video games is because like, yes, I was describing some of the happier parts of my childhood, but there's some other, like my childhood was not easy. I moved out on my own when I was 15. So like the Canucks were like a way for me to like remain sane, I guess, in a way. But it's because like I never really felt like I had wanted anything in life. So when I lose in a video game, my therapist was basically like, yeah, you take that as like your safety, like the thing that you're good at. Oh, you don't think you're good at it anymore, and then you lash out. So I was always kind of nervous to jump into that as well. So it was a combination of like being anxious or not knowing how to, and then also like subconsciously being like not putting in the effort to do so because you're worried that you might get threatened in that way, as stupid as it might sound. So I eventually I do it. I qualify in the final qualifier. Then I guess Richmond had built this gaming stadium. I wouldn't call it a stadium. But it's basically like a building next to a hotel and a Tim Hortons, and it's somewhat large, but stadium is a misnomer. It can fit like 500 people. So I go in there and I win my first game against a guy named HRiz, and it was a 3-2 game. I won in overtime. Jake Vertan into Nikolai Godolbin, back of the net OT winner. Then I play a guy named King Clutch, who I had been told, because once you qualified, you had to join this Discord server. I had been told that this guy was like awesome. So I play this guy. I get outshot like 27-9, and I win 3-0. Like kind of like, you know, everything you'd expect from like a Rick Tocchet game, like where you capitalize on the high danger chances you have. And then I lose in the finals to a guy named Baj. And Baj and I actually still keep in touch now. Like he's he's a unique character, but he's like, I've always liked talking to him because, well, one, like he beat me in tournaments, so I was able to kind of learn from him, but also just as a person, like him and I, we have a lot of similarities. So it's been cool to, keep that relationship intact over, I guess it'd be 7 years now, 7 years in August, actually. So I came second in that tournament, and then that's when I kind of realized, oh, I'm actually like good at this. So if you remember the 2019-2020 season, they came out with like these jerseys where they had like the raindrop texture on the shoulders. It was a stick and rink dark blue that they wore for the 50th anniversary. So we were the people who in that tournament, the 8 people who qualified, were the first people to ever hold that jersey, ever get that jersey. So I was able to get that, and I still have it somewhere in the house. It just moved to Vancouver Island, so I actually don't know where my jerseys are right now, or else I'd show it to you. But yeah, like that was a cool moment too, where it's like, oh, like there could be something from this. And then I played in it the year after, but that was during COVID, so we didn't get to go to the stadium. It was just online. I came in second again, so it was like then 2021, I actually like took the leap to like playing in the Gaming World Championship. The NHL ran until 2024. I was the Canuck representative on Xbox, and it's hard to really jump into like how gaming works, but like per every year, like the meta or like what works changes, just for people who don't know. And that year's game, NHL 21, was very like offense based, and I want to say up until a couple years ago, like I was kind of a more rudimentary offensive player. I was more defensive and transition based. So I like got dominated live on Twitch in front of, I want to say it was like 21,000 people. I lose game. I take a 5-minute major with Shea Weber in game 1 because we were using our like ultimate teams. And this guy, his name's Z-Man, he lives in New Jersey, and he beats me like a mule, man. Like, and just having that. And I remember if you ever heard of Pete Blackburn. He's a guy. I think he has the What Chaos podcast or something like that. He heard me typing on my on my laptop, and he's like, "Is he an accountant?" And like at the moment, like it's funny looking back on it. At the time, I was like, "Man, I was typing to like one of my friends because I was like nervous," and I was like, man, I'm gonna get like reamed for getting destroyed like this. And the moment I start typing like that, the moment I probably should have just packed it in because it's like you're already in your own head. And then I was like, okay, I can't be remembered for this. So I play in 2022. The game is like completely different. I remember I qualified for the portion of the tournament that was streamed by beating like one of the best players in the world. His name Sky is taken. I beat him 1-0 in game 3. That's like a very low scoring. I'd win with like 58 seconds left in the third. Matthew Kachuk one timer. So I play in this tournament. I have another when it's being streamed on the NHL Twitch channel. I have this game against a guy named Corey Perry 1. I lose 7-1, and then all of a sudden people are like, "Oh, it's happening again," because they remember from the year before. And then I win my next 2 games 4-3 and 3-2. Another last minute winner in game 3. NHL then after that they send me to Montreal, so I get to go to Montreal for the NHL draft. I get to meet Gary Bettman. I met, and by the way, Gary Bettman, he was nice to us. So I don't know what he's like, in a business meeting or to the owners, but he was nice to us. I got to meet and play against Uri Slavkovsky and Cutter Gauthier and Olympian Emily Clark, who now plays for, I think, the Ottawa Charge of the PWHL. Mm-hmm. Got to do a lot of cool things with that. If you look up my name, which is Edward Nickel McCabe, you could probably find it on my Twitter. There's images of me taken by the NHL up on the 2022 NHL draft stage, like 5 minutes before the event went live on Sportsnet. So it was like kind of those things where it was like, wow, like I know you were like, oh, how did it start with video games? But like walking through the whole journey is important because it explains how I got here, where it was like, okay, people, they're like, oh, why are you so analytics based? It's like I had to use numbers and stuff when I played video games in order to be successful in that. And then now it's like, okay, I don't want to be known as like, oh, the video game guy in some way, because people will be like, well, real hockey's not a video game. But how can I take those ideas, transfer them to real hockey, and then kind of use that knowledge as kind of like a market inefficiency, and then exploit that to get my foot in the door, which is actually kind of working right now.
That was the question I was gonna ask you about. Like, I mean, first off, why is analytics so important for today's game in the NHL?
So I would have struggled to answer this even a couple months ago. Like I would have had the answer in my head, but it would have been hard for me to communicate it. But actually, in college right now, I'm in an HR management class. And what we've learned is, and this is more about like the hiring process, is finding inefficiencies within your company and then figuring out how you as a human or as a company full of humans can recognize the biases you may have and then hire to help fill in those gaps. Mm-hmm. I feel like analytics is that practice of filling in the gaps that the eye test has, which is also why I'm not one of these people who are like, use analytics for everything, because you can't, right? Like I could take any analytic model that has halfway decent legitimacy, and I could spin the analytics to make a disingenuous like argument. Like I could take analytics and tell you why Niels Höglander should be playing 23 minutes a night at 5-on-5. I like Niels Höglander as a player. I actually think he is like better than what our last 2 coaches have given him, ice time wise. But also I recognize that Niels Höglander is not a first liner playing 23 minutes a night. There's context involved, right? Like how does one's teammates factor into their analytics? How does their ice time deployment, like are they playing against bad competition? Are they playing against elite competition? How does that play into their analytics? And how do you take those context cues and then apply your own, I call them modifiers, like mind modifiers, to like, okay, this analytic is elite, but also there's these other contextual aspects. Okay, that subtracts him a point here. This adds a point here, right? Like that's being able to do that. That is the skill in using analytics. You got to be able to use analytics to fill in those gaps while also not completely handing everything over to them, because if you could just do that, then everybody would be out of a job, because you could just come up with a model on a computer and then it would spit out outcomes that would they wouldn't be 100% accurate because there's always outliers, but you could probably find one with a 90% efficiency rate, and that's never going to be the case, because hockey, like a buddy of mine has told me many times on Twitter, hockey isn't played on spreadsheets. It's true. Like, these are humans, and humans are going to, like, here's what analytics can't, factor in. How is someone's anxiety level come crunch time, right? Like, you could say, oh, these analytics point to a player who has fantastic playmaking vision, but if they get tunnel vision when the game, it's down to crunch time, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, if oh, they don't take a lot of penalties, okay, but if the penalties they do take are in tied games because they're nervous about making a mistake and they overcompensate, that is a lot more important than just looking at base analytics. Like, it's so much about the context that surrounds them. So I would say analytics are important because they help fill in the gap of the eye test, but at the same time, the eye test can fill in some of the gaps for the analytics. So it's about finding that balance, and also recognizing that you as a human aren't, like, you're not perfect. Humans have never been perfect. Like, nothing is perfect, mm-hmm. right? Which is why you need a whole bunch of different ways of thinking. So, like, the way I think about hockey, it can't just be 20 people in a room who think hockey like me. It's got to be a person who thinks like me, person who thinks like you, a person who thinks like one of the viewers, someone with, that's why, like, assistant GMs, right? We got assistant GMs who have law degrees. We have assistant GMs who, in Carolina, one, I believe, was coming up with some patent for, like, bio robots and stuff. Like, it's so much. You need doctors, you have to fill in all the gaps, because that's how you're going to create the most comprehensive model and an organizational structure to help build a contender.
Yeah. It's all about having a bunch of different skill sets come together to make the parts, or the whole, bigger than the parts, right? So everyone can help each other out and, look at each other's weaknesses and make each other better. And I think that's very important to have dissenting views when it comes to who you hire for your hockey team.
For example, Russell, like, if I opened a restaurant, right? What's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Fudge.
Okay. So imagine I open a restaurant and I'm like, okay, we have fudge flavored ice cream. And you're like, oh, what other foods do you have? And I said, okay, well, we have fudge flavored waffles. We have fudge flavored pancakes. We have fudge sandwiches. We have fudge soups. Would you want to go to that restaurant?
No. I mean, you might go once, right? Yeah, maybe twice if you're crazy. But eventually you're like, well, I've had fudge now, so it's time to try a different one.
Yeah, and that's the thing with, like, creating a 21-man or a 23-man roster with, a couple scratches in there, is that you need different flavors. And it's the same about creating an organization as well. You need different flavors, because the one flavor is not going to satisfy the needs of everybody. It's not going to satisfy the needs of everything that's on the ice. You need good forecheckers. You need people who are going to put the puck in the back of the net. You need play drivers. You can't have people who are entirely play drivers. If you have too many, all of a sudden, is their efficiency or is their effectiveness going to drop, because there's not going to be enough time with the puck for everyone. So you take a play driver, you turn him into someone who doesn't have the puck. Is their effectiveness going to drop? All that stuff. There's so much to read. You just can't have fudge flavored everything.
Yeah. Moderation in all things, as we say.
Yep. Yeah.
So, like we talked about off the top of our chat today, you've just gotten into the writing part of your career. You've started a new hockey blog. I'll have all the links in the description of today's video, so everyone can go check it out. I've already seen you post about a lot of the top draft picks so far. You've got articles out on Ivar Stenberg, Chase Reed, and Keaton Verhoff, who I did dream the other night the Canucks drafted Keaton Verhoff. So if that happens, I am psychic, just so you know. What got you to finally start writing, and what has been your favorite part about it so far?
So I've been in a Canucks group chat. I won't tell you everybody who's in it, just for privacy reasons, because I don't know if they want people to know about it, right? So I have a couple of people on Canucks Twitter who have been pushing this for about a year, but also like for me personally, like I have to, I'm 25, I'm in school, but I also got to make sure that like one, I knew I was going to move. I've known for about a year I was going to move out here. So I had to make sure the move was fine. I had to make sure I had all, because again, like my life has been so weird. I had to make sure I had all the school credentials. I graduated high school, but it was like, oh, do I have to take an upgrading course for something? Because, I wasn't straight A student. Like my grade 12, for example, I missed 112 out of 189 days. Because when you live on your own and you have the choice to stay home, you can just stay home, So there's all that stuff. So I had to make sure I had all those, ducks in a row. And I also wanted to make sure that, I had an income so I could, rent a place here or be able to afford the move to the island. Because what nobody tells you, moving from like even from city to city, like I lived in Surrey and I moved to Langley. That was, like $1,500. No one tells you that when you move to the island, yeah, it's a ferry, but like the moving costs overall, I want to say it was like 4 to 5 grand for us. So I had to make sure I had money for that. Just wanting to get used to the area. There was just so much going on. But these people who have been completely supportive of me were like, you need to actually start writing because, nothing's going to happen for you if you're just, anyone can put out some on Twitter, but can you get someone to read an actual blog or something on a website or a Substack that is uniquely yours? Can you put it in a way that is academic? And I'm going to let you know right now, it's hard to be academic on Twitter because one, there is a character limit. Two, the formatting is bad. And three, some of the people on there, crazy might not be the appropriate word for it, but they can be quite harsh, irrational, and the differences of opinion can sometimes range from like okay, I get your what you might be thinking to like I'm pretty sure you've never watched the game of hockey before in your life, and also it's not given the same credit as actual journalism, which is like the blogs and the article part. So can you write it in an academic fashion as well? um, Eventually I got to the point where I was like, yeah, okay, I feel confident enough, like in my schooling, because again, I mentioned I wasn't the best high school student, where I was like, okay, I'm actually like for anybody, I'm gonna let everybody know this now. If you are a student at UVic, UBC, Douglas College, and you're wondering like, I'm not really digging these like 3 hour traditional courses. If you go to Camosun, it's the way they do teaching is way different, where it's like applied learning. And for someone with ADHD who struggles like sitting through like the traditional lectures, being able to apply my learning in class and like actually engage in stuff that I'll actually be doing in the workplace, it makes school, I like, it's wild for me to say this, it's fun. And I'm actually doing very well. Like now I'm that A student that my mom used to relentlessly mock me for not being. Um, because she'd be like, well, you clearly have intelligence and stuff. Like, oh, if it's about blah, blah, she would be more insulting about it. Oh, when it comes to video games or, hockey, you can remember X, Y, and Z. But when it comes to, order of operations, you're getting 57%. And it's like, well, I don't care about the order of operations, although now that I'm in sports management, it turns out I have to care about it. But it's like, yeah, like now that it's put in a format that works for me, all of a sudden I'm just a great student. So I also wanted to make sure like, can I handle writing while also maintaining good grades? And as soon as I started getting good grades, I was like, well, even if I were to drop, let's say hypothetically 10% of my grade because I was busy doing blogs or whatever, I'd still be an A student. So why not, like, yes, it's adding something else to my plate, but I clearly am over exceeding in this way. Like take the risk. I was talking to someone earlier, and I mentioned how when I was supposed to be a plumber when I was like 22, and then I got lung cancer. Found out while I was working with silica in a high-rise apartment, and when I recovered from that, like halfway through my chemotherapy process, I realized, well, one, I can't be a plumber anymore, because that's what I'm grateful that working in plumbing helped me find the symptoms, because I definitely would have had, my doctor told me I definitely would have had it before I worked in plumbing, but the plumbing thing helped show the symptoms earlier. So I'm forever grateful for plumbing for that. But I definitely can't do it anymore. So I might as well chase my actual dream, which is working in hockey. And yeah, basically that combination of things led me to being like, okay, I'm comfortable starting this blog. Like, one of the things that I deal with is I am easily rage baited sometimes. It's hard for me. ADHD and autism spectrum disorder, which again, something I found out later in life. Later in life, I'm 25. At 23, I have a hard time reading tone through a screen, for example. If it's not video chat, like if it's text, it's hard. Or if someone says something and I don't necessarily agree with it, and I'm passionate about that, even if it's someone who likely doesn't deserve the light of day, I will respond to it, no matter how small you are. And I know that might give people who watch this some ideas, but I'm getting better at it, so don't even try it. Yeah, like, just, it was a combination of things where it's like, okay, I'm gonna write. And then what do I enjoy about it? To keep it simple, because most of my answers have been very long-winded, I love analyzing the game of hockey. And especially after my first article, so you were mentioning how, like, I had Ivar Stenberg and stuff. I don't know how to create a website, right? So I actually have one about Caleb Malhotra, and I just updated my website so that you can click a link to see my actual full archive. So when I wrote the Caleb Malhotra one, that's when I first started getting some feedback from people. And then it was the Ivar Stenberg one that Drance reposted. Then, like, I was enjoying it before because it was a place where I could put my thoughts. But then now it's like, okay, people actually respect me as an authority on the game. And then now it's like, okay, yeah, like, now it's fun because I feel like I'm actually educating people. And when I was doing professional video games, I actually had a thing called SAP Academy, where I would help people learn how to play NHL, the video game. Now it's kind of like SAP Academy, but it's real hockey. And I know I'm not the best academic writer. I have no journalism credentials. I'm young within the game. But I do feel like what Dran said about me having compelling insights is true in a way. And again, not to pump my own tires, but because of the background I have in sports and with the video game thing, I do feel like I offer perspectives that a lot of people don't see, or that are rare enough that I can find my own footing within the hockey community.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, isn't the new GM of the New Jersey Devils a former poker player or something like that? So
he actually has a book about how to play poker. Yeah. And Eric Tulsky, like, people call him like the golden boy, right? And it's funny because I believe he's in his 50s, so golden man now. Golden middle-aged man. But he did a lot of stuff with, like, I believe he worked for a company that was basically like it was something to do with like robots or machinery or something. Like, again, different backgrounds. It's just, there's new insights. People got to recognize that, people got to recognize that in this new world of sports, that the market inefficiency is people who aren't from traditional sports backgrounds. Because when you hire everybody, all of the best people who are in the sports industry are already hired. So how do you get that leg up? Well, it's about hiring people who are able to, again, like I talked about with analytics, fill in those gaps elsewhere. And the people who've done that are now successful. Like, Vegas has a bunch of people who are not from traditional hockey backgrounds. Carolina, Florida, like, there's just a lot of smart people in hockey. And if you're not from within the game, like, I know we have a trend of seeing former NHL players be coaches. If you're not from within the game at a young age, it can be hard to break in. Well, you gotta because it's about who you know. But if you don't really have the greatest connections, you've got to create a name for yourself through some way, and that's either a degree or by being unique enough with enough of a following that you become undeniable.
Uh, I mean, we're leading right into it. We're talking Canucks here today too, and about hiring people. So, not exactly from outside of the hockey world, but a guy like Darren Hermiston gets hired by the Canucks to be the new director of player personnel and player development. Coming in as a player agent, that's the second player. Or I mean, you can go all the way back to Gillis with the Canucks, but they also have Caston Gay, who is their assistant GM, who is a former player agent. Um, that's one question a lot of people had when coming into this new Canucks regime with the co-presidents, which in itself is very interesting. The Canucks went with two presidents. Ryan Johnson was the guy who was in the system. People were like, we need some outside voices. We need a different perspective. Do you think a guy like Darren Hermiston is enough of that? Or are you looking for the Canucks organization to hire more people to bring in that kind of analytics side of things into the organization?
Well, we know basically, like, without us being able to go into the Canuck offices and look at, like, have like an audit, we are kind of under the impression that they don't have enough analytics to begin with. So I am always looking for the Canucks to hire more forward thinking people, like Cam Lawrence or Sam Ventura. I mean, we just saw what happened with Buffalo absolutely fleecing the Chicago Blackhawks on a level yeah, that's, oh gosh, man, I feel bad. Well, is it really hard to feel bad for Chicago? But
No.
but like I'm happy for Buffalo. I mean, they're our cousin expansion team, right? 1970 and whatnot. But it's, yeah, like, Hermanson is interesting because I believe that the agent that he worked under, he was kind of like a junior agent. So if you actually look at uh, they were formerly Wasserman, I believe, and then they became the team after their owner did some nefarious stuff. Um, I believe the person that he worked under was the former director of player personnel or former director of player development for the Canucks back in 2008, 2009, I believe. So yeah, like, that's interesting. And I guess his job was to find younger talents to kind of bring on board. So yeah, I mean, that's always interesting. Again, it's another person because he was a former player who is within the game, but also at the same time, it's like, okay, like, here's the thing. The Canucks are, I want to say, probably, if they were ran properly by ownership, they should be the third biggest market in Canada, right? Like, it should be either Toronto, Montreal, one or two, and then Vancouver. Like, no disrespect to Calgary or Edmonton, but Vancouver is not just it's a world-renowned city, right? Like, the money should not be an issue. Um, and that's why, in my opinion, they should have had the money available to, one, get the analytic stuff that they needed, and two, always be hiring staff. They should always be able to find the newest talents. And of course, there are going to be people, like, even if you are a rich organization who's extremely forward thinking, that can lead to organizational bloat, where there's like so many people that eventually people at the bottom of the totem pole, they don't feel as if their opinion is valued enough. And what I learned actually in organizational behavior, which is another class that I'm taking this semester, is that oftentimes people's motivations are based on whether they feel value at a company more so than even money. Money can be a motivational factor when, for example, you don't have another job lined up. Therefore, you might feel like, okay, I need this job in order to survive, because that's a thing that people face. Like, many people are one missed paycheck away from their lives falling apart, right? But that, motivation of, like, I want to feel like, one, I can progress throughout this company, there's upward mobility, and two, that my opinion is valued. So that's why you can't have just a million people in an organization. So there are going to be some people who go to the smaller organizations because they feel like their opinion is going to be valued more. but they should always be looking for the next up and coming analytics person. And that's like, that could be anyone from any field, as long as they show a proficiency with numbers and a proficiency with being able to spot, for example, if you are, let's say you're a marketing major, if you can spot inefficiencies with like, money, right? Like how money is spent in certain areas, if you can then, during an interview, or if you can show a proficiency for being able to translate that skill to sports, bring them on. Like it's not, yes, the money is, it's easy for me to say, oh, $100,000, 100,000, like it's nothing, because I couldn't, $100,000 would be life-changing to me per year. But for a family that, billions of dollars, the team is worth a couple $1 billion, $100,000 or even a couple million to upgrade this department should not, it shouldn't be, well, especially when you subtract all the player salaries that are going out the door potentially this summer, it shouldn't be that hard, honestly. Like, you were bringing up like the co-presidents, right? The Sedins. Yeah, it's unique, but also the Sedins are unique, right? So that's why it always surprised me that like they didn't find a way to be like, oh, can we have two captains, like both Hronek and Daniel wear C's, or just not have a captain and just have them as the two only like assistant or associate, whatever you want to call them, captains. Like they're just, it's just such a unique situation. And yes, I know they're within the game. The one thing that I would say is that knowing who they are as people and who they are, like even once they retired, they were, they're still beating prospects on the grouse grind. Like they're extremely motivated people for themselves, their family, and they love the Canucks organization. They're extremely private, so it's hard to know this for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if, over the last couple of years, because they've been in like lower level organizational roles, that they've spent time talking to people within the game about, okay, where are analytics heading? I would not be surprised if they've updated themselves on that stuff. So, it's hard to know without seeing some action. Like all we've really gotten are AHL contract signings and, the couple front office signings that, we've seen. But I feel like they're kind of an exception until proven otherwise. And then with Ryan Johnson, I'm a bit worried, mostly because he did come up under the Rutherford regime, but that's not his fault, right? Like for example, when Eugene Melnick owned the Senators, notoriously not a great owner. Pierre Dorian, notoriously not a good GM, to the point where when it was hired that he'd be hired by the Canucks, fans and business owners across the city rejected it thoroughly, right? If Pierre Dorian had knocked on my door and said, hey, you want a job? That's my foot in the door. I'm taking it because, one, no one else is offering it. And two, again, like I said, foot in the door. So yeah, like with RJ, it's, he had to get that spot at some point. And I think with teams, for example, like apparently it was rumored at one point that the Tampa Bay Lightning wanted him. I know Nashville wanted him. I think the Tampa Bay thing was years ago. They didn't want him as GM, but they wanted him within the organization. And I know that they currently have Jeff Tambellini in the organization, another former Canuck. I think there's enough there where you can be like, okay, like, yeah, it's good to give him a chance. But I don't want, I really just don't want him to be a Rutherford recast where it's like Rutherford wanted him as the guy instead of Evan Gold, reportedly. And that endorsement wouldn't have come as like, I hired, Johnson as AHL GM, so he's got to be the guy. There would have been more to it. He might have seen him as like, an understudy of sorts. I don't want him to be Rutherford 2.0. At least on the mic, he isn't. I'll say that. And he's preached patience, which is great, but words are words. And I know like a large thing right now, for example, is Hronek. So if you want to talk about like the Hronek or like potential trade candidates, I'm of the belief that you can't tear a team down entirely in one off season. One, I think it's unrealistic to ask a GM to do that. And two, I actually think it's bad to tear tear everything down right away, because you'll get left in a Chicago situation where like you're handing out $5 million to Corey Perry past his prime, or Nick Foligno, and then all of a sudden nobody wants to come because there's nobody like that you can even sell potential around. Like they had Bedard and like Nazar and them, but you know, I this might sound a bit rude, but like hockey players tend to believe that even like on bad teams they can win in any given year. If you make it abundantly obvious that there's like no chance, they're not going to show up, and then it's hard to build anything. And then all of a sudden down the line you get this, which is giving up 4th overall, 45th overall, and your highest scoring defenseman, who happens to be 6'8" and actually has some decent underlying numbers, for a guy that, yes, is a good like number 3, 4, but his underlying numbers actually struggle the further down he is in the lineup, which is indicative of a player that actually needs a support player with them. In Bowen Byram, and there's a person who actually is from the NHL video game community. His name's Don't Be Sod. He has gotten a lot of information about the Blackhawks right over the years. So I will preface this by saying that it is not confirmed, nor is this guy an accredited journalist. But when he reports that that it's going to be 12.5 million times 7 years, I'm inclined to mostly believe him, even if the number exceeds 11 million. This is genuinely crazy. Like he's not Bowen Byram is not a number 1 defenseman, and it feels like they just completely forgot that he has Philip Hedl level concussion history. Like this is dangerous. This is a dangerous move, and I felt like it was made out of desperation. Like, is there anything else? Like they must have found out, okay, Sharks are taking Stenberg after the Eklund trade. We don't want to wait for a defenseman, so let's just go get an impact defenseman now. And their decision was Bowen Byram, right? Like that reeks of desperation in my mind. I don't want them to trade Philip Hronek just because people on Twitter say they should. I'm actually of the opinion that, you know, if he is really this adamant about not waiving, one, there's probably a good reason for it. Like, for example, and I'm not saying I know this, but if he was like, oh, my wife and I are trying to start a family. Okay, well, Vancouver's a good place to do that, like relative to, you know, at least me personally, I feel like it would be better to raise a young family in Vancouver than like, I don't know, Carolina or something, right? Moving to another country and all that. But also it's like, okay, the cap is going up 9.5% year over year. So it's going to be, I want to say, is this the season where it's going up to 104 or 113?
104.
Okay, 104. So next season it's 113 and a half. And then I think that's where the MOU for the CBA cuts off the guaranteed increases. But if it continues to rise or to raise 9.5% year over year, it's going to be like 124.5 million the year after. Alan Walsh says that the players are actually owed money back. So it could, like, if they decide, instead of giving like lump sum payments to the players, if they decide to just implement that into a cap increase year, it could be 128, 129, 130 million 2 seasons down the line. When his no movement clause turns into a 15-team no trade, there's no reason why he won't be worth more.
And moving forward, the need for a right-handed shot defenseman isn't going anywhere. So it could very quickly be a situation where they can still get that Bowen Byram level of return from him in a year or two, even if they don't trade him in and amongst the frenzy that we've seen here on the 23rd of June, 2026.
Yeah, so like imagine 7.5 million, and let's say he gets traded July 1st of 2028, which I think is the day his no movement clause becomes a 15-team no trade. Hypothetically, like with these cap increases and the potential like massive one that happens after the preset ones, we could be looking at like 140 million or 138 million dollar cap, 7.5 million on that for another 4 years. So by the time his contract's over, maybe 160 million dollar cap, 155 million dollar cap. Yeah, I'm pretty sure teams are going to look at him in 2 years, because I don't foresee his value getting worse. Like even if he's 40 to 50 points instead of like, I think he had 49 this year, which was, I want to say, a career high. But even if he gets like, let's say 37 to 45 points, right-handed defenseman, that is at bare minimum a number 3. And then you put in the fact that he's right-handed, has the monster shot, and we already saw Toronto pay for a guy with the monster shot in Darren Radish. I'm not saying that Hronek will score that many goals, but they're, you know, like with that cap, it's actually 7.25 million. It's yeah, you could get a monster return, especially with that, you know, the cost control, the cap certainty. You could get a monster return for that, and also because it's only a 15 team and his contract, again, like I said, will be 4 years. He does have a level of control of where he can go, but there's still going to be like 18, 19 teams if you include expansion to where he could get traded to. And all those teams are going to, well, not all of them, but a lot of those teams are going to be looking to add a guy like Philip Hronek. You could get a monster return. I've said this for, I want to say 2 years now. The NHL has completely moved in, or well, not completely, but are starting to completely move into the NBA level, like territory, where draft picks are, it's candy. Like you just, you know, you pop them like Jolly Ranchers, man. Like they just, no one, like they burn holes in your pocket. Like you just have $1,000 and 20, you know, full of $20 bills, right? Like you just want to spend them. I wouldn't be surprised if we started seeing like the pick swap stuff instead, or, you know, like just stuff like that. So yeah, I don't foresee, barring another, you know, pandemic or massive world event, that we're going to be reverting back to the old trade value stuff.
It's gonna knock on wood there for a quick second.
Yeah. I mean, I got a wooden desk, so I've been knocking. But yeah, like I don't see a world where we revert back to those values. And even if it were to happen, let's say 2 years down the line, the cap is going to be high. It's going to be a flat cap. So therefore, Hronek's cost certainty is actually going to matter a little bit more. So that should kind of cancel out some things. He's going to be worth a lot. The only worry that I have is that his shoulder has been an issue before.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying, like, even teams are willing to take risks because finding players who have been injured and then believing that your medical staff can rejuvenate them or help them, that is also a market inefficiency of some kind. If as long as he plays 70 plus games in each of the next 2 seasons, he's going to be worth so much. And he has a longer track record than Byram. Like, yes, Byram is younger. What else is he better at? He's younger and faster. What else is he better at?
He hasn't even been a top pair defenseman for most of his career if he's been able to play the whole season, which I believe he's only done twice in his entire career.
So it's, other than draft pedigree, there's nothing you can say to me, and age. There's nothing you can say to me that will convince me that Hronek won't be able to fetch more 2 years down the line.
So I wanted to pick your brain, and this seems like no matter what happens in the Canucks conversation, this is something that always comes up. No matter what time of year it is for the last couple of years, it is the discussion around one EP40.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Because it's such an interesting conversation, because you have this player who at one point in his career did reach over 100 points, looked like a dangerous, effective player. But then, you know, as everyone has documented very well in the last couple of years, he has not been that 100-point player. He has not produced at the level that we want him to. And I'm sure if this Canucks fan base had their way, they would eat him alive. What is your current stance on him in this organization with the new coach and the new leadership group? And what do you think the Canucks should be doing with him moving into this draft and this free agency and the new season?
So I want to preface this, because I have to preface it all the time on Twitter, because I do defend him a lot, that he himself there is blame to be put on him, because at the end of the day, he has to put in the work. But at the same time, I feel like we just forget that athletes are humans. Like, there's a lot of stories out there about what may have gone on in that locker room. But the fact that even agents are talking about how bad it was, and our own players on like Canucks Insider podcast, they're not outright saying it, but being like, oh, after the trade deadline, I started feeling better. You know, like, And these are young players who hadn't even been in the locker room all that long. For it to already affect them like that is kind of damning. So to me, it's I want to just see him in a healthy environment. And I've mentioned this before, like if the team doesn't get out of the dark ages, like the dinosaur ages, this is going to happen with another prospect. Like the reason why I have so much faith in Elias Pettersson is because I say this and there's no hyperbole behind it. His fall off is genuinely historic. There's been no player as a centerman with his production profile at his age to fall off like this. Now, I guess there's a first time for everything, but knowing what we know about the Canucks, it kind of seems like there's organizational blame to be put. For example, you tell him for years, under Tocchet and Rutherford that, oh yeah, he needs to play like Crosby. He's not Crosby. His skating stride has always been inefficient, kind of choppy, weird. So you ask him to put on weight, and he clearly has. Like, I know they still list him at 176 on NHL.com, but he's been listed that since the first year. I'm under the impression, through eliteprospects.com and a couple other people, that he's around 185 to 190. That's not him. Like, in the metrics point to it, he had a faster skating speed this year, but his acceleration is worse. Like, it takes him a bit longer to hit top speed. He doesn't draw as many penalties, and before this season, he was second behind McDavid since entering the league in net penalty differential. He takes more penalties now. He doesn't look the same when he's handling the puck, which might be, due to like wrist issues that he's had in the past. I just look at him and I say, one, you can't, like, I understand why the Canucks would be willing to retain. We're already retaining on Tyler Myers this year, and you only get 3 retention slots. I think it's crazy to be considering having like that retention slot for 6 years. Also, would like to point out that if we do retain on EP40 for 6 years, I believe that will be 17 years in a row at the end of it where we will have had dead money on the books in some way, shape, or form. That's just not acceptable, because that would be through 3 different regimes, right? Like, that's crazy to me. Also, the Canucks there's a reason why they finished 32nd, and we could be like, oh, Adam Foote wasn't a great head coach, but also the roster wasn't great. We don't have a lot of premium trade assets, so we can't just throw the ones that we may have out for nothing. And also, I'll bring this up. Filip Chytil is a massive injury risk. With that being said, if Chytil does get injured again, you are asking one of Braden Coots or Atu Ratu to play second line center if you trade Elias Pettersson. I understand that we want to develop these young players, but confidence is a massive part of a development. If you let either of those 2 young players get eaten alive for 70 games, even if, imagine Chytil doesn't play a game next year. He will, but just hypothetically, for 84 games, you are going to kill their development. I don't care if it's Manny Malhotra. Like, Manny Malhotra is a great coach. He's apparently a great guy, good motivator, understands the development process. You can tell a guy to keep at it and that he's doing all the right things, but if the results are, putting up a Brock Besser level minus 41, and I know plus minus is not a great stat, but hockey players still look at it because they are behind on the analytics curve themselves. It's not going to be great. Like, you're going to ruin their confidence and potentially ruin their development. I don't see the risk in under Manny Malhotra putting, like, let's say he was really good with Höglander and Linus Karlsson. He has been for a couple of years. It's just Linus Karlsson was our top 5-on-5 producer last season, and he played about 10 minutes a night 5-on-5. I think he had like the 11th most ice time per game of any Canuck forward last year. He deserved a lot more. Niels Höglander deserved a lot more ice time. I know he didn't score, but in the games he had with Pettersson and Karlsson together, they were just great together. And I think you'd be a fool to sell low on Pettersson. My thought process, and again, this is going back to the cap increases, he had a higher points per game margin under Foot than his last year in Tocchet, or last season under Tocchet, which is crazy because everybody else fell off, right? If he plateaus, it'd be unfortunate, but as the cap goes up, his percentage decreases and the money owed to him decreases. Mm-hmm. So I think his value would go up just based on that. Also, like I mentioned, Bowen Byram might get 12 and a half times 7. And I'm pretty sure Nico Hischier is about to sign 12 million. And I know Hischier's been the better player over 2 years, but Elias Pettersson has the higher ceiling under the right circumstances. I don't buy into the character issue problem because, like I said at the start, these are human beings. If what I've heard is to be believed, I would understand why a player might check out. Like, again, we heard Brock Besser say that after the trade deadline, it was like the first time in a year or so that he'd actually gone out after a game and hung out with the players. Mm-hmm. So if you're like a recluse, if you don't feel respected going to the rink, if this stuff has been going on between you, management, by the way, the management staff, and the head coach who was on the coaching staff of the coach who told the captain and pseudo captain at forward, JT Miller, to toughen you up, you might just feel a lot of resentment and therefore your best performance might not come out. Plus, we have statistics to back up that every line mate Elias Pettersson had last year shot under expected. Mm-hmm. Connor Garland shot under expected. Jake DeBrusk had 3 5-on-5 goals last year on about, it was either 11.9 or 12.9 expected 5-on-5 goals. Like, people want to say, okay, Pettersson's got to produce. He's setting up people for chances. They're not converting. Okay, he needs to score goals. What playmaking forward is on the Canucks that could help him other than Höglander? Höglander and Karlsson were probably the two best, like, playmaking forwards other than Elias Pettersson last year. Because if you go through the list, like, you can think Rossi, but he was injured a lot of the time with that foot injury, and they actually worked well in the power play together, where Rossi was kind of taking that like JT Miller position on the left half wall, or he'd walk down, either rip the wrister or a cross ice pass. And that's when Pettersson had that 2-goal game. I think it was his last 2 goals of the season. I want to say it was against Florida late in the season. But no one could get him the puck in a high danger area. And he's always been an efficiency scorer. Like, he's never been a guy to put up like 270 shots. So he needs to be in high dangerous chances. They don't put him in those chances, or they don't put him in the spots to, shoot, like, take those shots. It's this weird combination of like, it's such a weird combination where I'm like, I don't feel like you can't give him 1 year under Malhotra. Because also, like, he could be the playmaker that helps Lekkerimäki. You got to think about the impact on the younger players. Like, I talked about the bad parts that might happen, but if you put Lekkerimäki on his wing, for example, or Höglander on his wing, or Linus Karlsson, and they actually mesh together, Linus Karlsson could get you like a Tanner Jeannot package when Jeannot was traded from Nashville to Tampa Bay, because teams wanted Karlsson last year. I don't know what the return would have been for Linus Karlsson, but if Linus Karlsson gets, let's say, 40 points this year, and most of them are 5-on-5, a team's going to pay a decent chunk for him because his contract's only $2.25 million for, it would be from the trade deadline onward and then 1 season after. Could you get Höglander to not be a negative value asset and trade him? Can Lekkerimäki come into his own? There's just so much on the table. And if those things do happen, like I think they could under Manny Malhotra, who is a player who does, he does, when he coaches, there is a lot of point shot type stuff, but he also focuses on like overloading onto one side of the ice with the cycle, which should open up space for the Lekkerimäki shot, the Pettersson shot, and some backdoor like crash the net plays where Pettersson can throw stuff on. And I hope he drops the weight because, like we said, there's not enough analytics or research and development staff. So hopefully they tell him, hey, just go back to being 176, like go back to being a twig, basically. You're not only increasing the value of those players and raising, their stock within the organization to other organizations, you are raising the stock of Elias Pettersson. And my thing is that by the time this team is able to contend again, he's going to be too old. He's not going to fit in with the next age group. So unless the cap rises to the point where you could be like, oh, Elias Pettersson is making the same amount of money as a second line winger, and you move him to the wing, I think at some point you need to trade him. But I also know that Elias Pettersson, all he's ever wanted since he was a young boy is to be a Canuck. I don't think he sees the things in his day-to-day life that are reflective of what you will see on social media. Therefore, he might not feel the same angst and same pressure to move as you might see again on social media. Um, yeah, I think he does need to be traded because again, we don't have enough premium assets to kickstart this rebuild or to help supplement it down the line. But I think doing it now it's a domino move. It would be a domino move that could affect a lot of things negatively. And also it's like if he were to pop off next season immediately, I don't know if I could live with it. like, like just think about some of the teams that have been rumored, right? Toronto is one. You put him with Nyes and I'm not the biggest fan of Nyes, but if you put him with, say, Nyes and Nylander because McKenna ends up on Matthews' wing, so they move Nylander with Pettersson. Yeah, that's going to be fun to watch. Like two players who are control players who, there's one definite shooter, one guy who can shoot in Elias Pettersson, but mostly a playmaker. That is scary. You move him, if you go to Carolina, you put him with Stankoven and Blake. All of a sudden, you got a more defensive presence there. You could have, even if Pettersson's not the greatest faceoff taker, I don't think an analytical team would care all that much about like neutral zone faceoffs and stuff. You put him with Stankoven and Blake and let them run wild, and you got someone to babysit. Think, heck, even Detroit, right? They're probably losing Dylan Larkin. Mm-hmm. I think they're kind of in a weird like spot where they gotta figure out what they're doing because Steve Yzerman likes to hoard prospects and picks. But you put him with Lucas Raymond and Alex DeBrincat, that's a recipe for success. The only place where I'm like he probably won't succeed is LA. I don't think he'd do good under Laviolette, and also he would, unless unless Byfield takes that next step, you'd be asking him to be a 1C on a team that doesn't have a lot of forward depth, and that might just be moving him from Vancouver to Vancouver USA edition. So it's a bit weird in that way, but I just don't see the downside in holding on to him for at least one more year, because with the cap increases, not only is the percentage going to go down, but I don't foresee a lot of guys going to free agency next year too, because like we've seen, players either get moved and then sign an extension with that team, or they just sign an extension with the team they're with because teams don't want to rock the boat too much, especially for people who, are either currently under contract or are going to be UFAs in a couple of years. It's usually like the RFAs who they're more willing to rock the boat over because there's more like risk and more upside involved in trading them. But yeah, like I don't feel like I would like your opinion on it too, because if you like, I want that difference of opinion if you were to have it, where like I feel like at the very least you hold on to him for one more year, because if he's 50-point PD again, okay, you're tanking, and if you trade Elias Pettersson right now, you're going to be below the cap floor, and you don't want to get into a situation where you're retaining on Pettersson, and then also you would have to retain money on a deal, picking up someone by overpaying them in free agency and then looking to trade them. And then you're maxed out your retention slots for someone like Drew O'Connor who could fetch something next trade deadline, right? Like there's so much where it's like just keep him for one more year.
Yeah, no, I'm actually, I wish I could give you a different opinion, but I'm of the same opinion. You got to at least give him one more year. Give him a year under Manny Malhotra, who's going to run this team completely differently than Tocchet did, than Adam Foote did last year. Which, I mean, if anyone's seen Nothing Is Perfect, me and Adam Foote do not get along. I've never met the man, but I don't think we get along in person either. With the way I just don't even like talking about how poorly he ran this team, and I just think it's one of those things as a diminished asset. PD I don't think there is a lower level that he can go after that year under Adam Foote. So the best case scenario is to keep him for 1 year, let him appreciate a little bit more, and then at that point, then you can reassess the situation. the other point that you brought up as well is Braden Coots coming into this organization. And I know that Rutherford talked about the fact that he thought he might want to have him playing on this team. But on this channel, I'm very much of the opinion I want to see Braden Coots start in Abbotsford next year. I want to see him play huge minutes down in Abbotsford with whatever coach they bring in. I think having Patterson and Coots as your 1-2 centers in Abbotsford next year would be fantastic. I haven't said it on stream yet, but I think Abbotsford next year, with the moves that they've been making, the players they've been locking up, they have most of their team under contract already. They might be a very sneaky good team in the AHL next year, and that could be a very good environment for a guy like Coots to play against men, because he hasn't been one of those players that has gone down and played in the NCAA. And there is something to be said for that, especially some of these prospects playing over in men's league in Europe as well. That's something that these guys who are playing the CHL are not getting. They're not playing against bigger bodies. They're not playing against mature individuals that can run them through the boards. So spending that time in the AHL developing, and like you said, if you're trading Pedersen, immediately Braden Coots is probably going to be a member of this roster, because Philip Heedle's over under on how many games his plays is in the as many as I can't count on maybe two hands if if we're lucky. So for me, it's Petey, stay on this team, see what you can do with him. And at the end of the day, if things turn around and he becomes the same player that he was before, then you might not want to trade him, because he could just be a good piece moving forward. Because at the end of the day, a comparison that I used to make a lot of the time, the difference between JT Miller and Pedersen is when Pedersen's having an off game, he's not a defensive liability. When JT Miller was having an off game, he was a disaster in his own zone. And he was someone who would then start slapping a stick on the back of the net and yelling at the rookie goaltender, right? You don't see Petey yelling at his teammates. He's not a problem on this team. And we've started to see some reports coming out from various people where Pedersen's just kind of a quiet guy, and you don't have to be a loud leader. You can lead by example. So my only thing for Petey would be like, listen, come to camp, make sure you're in the best shape of your entire career, showing up for Manny Malhotra, because he and Ryan Johnson and the Sedins can probably all beat you up the grouse grind. So you want to kind of try and compete with that. And if Pedersen can show up in relatively good shape, because it sounds like he wasn't the only veteran showing up last year to camp that was in bad shape. So bad, in fact, that they didn't want to post the results to show how bad all the veterans were in comparison. And I think Pedersen is the kind of guy, last year set the record for the team for most block shots by a forward. So he's very much willing to put his body on the line for this team. He's very much willing to fight for this city, because he has been a fan for his entire career. And lately it has been very difficult to find anyone who actually wants to play for the Vancouver Canucks. So me and you agree on this. Pedersen's got to stay. And then at next year we reassess, because I don't think that last year couldn't be an assessment of Pedersen as a player, because it was as much of a perfect storm for him personally. We all know what he dealt with 2 losses with him and his wife. There were stories about what he lost when it comes to monetization, when he got swindled out of hundreds of thousands of dollars with a real estate thing gone wrong. So there was stuff going on all over the place in his personal life. On top of that, he shows up to the work, where should be one of the places where maybe he can finally get that respite from the personal life. And we all have those, right? You talk about your video games. People talk about, for me, for the last 10 years before I retired from hockey, that was one of the places I could go and just get away from the reality of the world. But if you're showing up to then your job as well, and you have your little captain who looks like a sad British boy who reads too many books, giving you a hard time with his big mean uncle who also gives you a hard time, you don't have any place in the world where you feel safe. And that's not fun. So like Manny Malhotra said, I want to help Petey learn how to have fun. And if there's anyone who's going to turn this Pedersen around, then I think it's going to be Manny Malhotra.
Yeah, and like, I wish I could pose this question to people on Twitter in a way that like could come across good over text. But from an like purely Elias Pettersson's perspective, was last year the worst season of his career, or was it the season before, and this season just feels worse because the team finished 32nd? I would argue that Elias Pettersson was, on a per night basis, had more moments where you're like, oh, there's Petey, than the last year under Tocchet. Again, the bar is low, but like that goal against San Jose, for example, where he knocks it out of midair, he does fall and banks it off Askarov, but you wouldn't have seen that the year before. Or there was a snipe he had against Seattle where Kane gave him a nice saucer pass into the middle. It was one of Kane's 3 good passes all year. And he sniped it over Decord's glove. And you're like, oh, there's Petey.
Mm-hmm.
There's another one against the Cup champs Carolina where Petey picks off a pass from behind the net out into the slot, wires it. He had a streak this season, and I think he only finished with 15 goals this season. I think he had a stretch of like 10 goals in 11 games or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's Pettersson. Like he has those streaks of, it's weird because like he'll have those streaks of getting a lot of goals and then he'll have like no goals, but then, when he's on, then all of a sudden it's not like, oh, he's just nothing. One, like you said, he's a responsible defensive player. Mm-hmm. And 2, then he just turns into assists. That's what he did with Kuzmenko, right? Mm-hmm. And again, like Kuzmenko is a control-based player. There's no one other than Höglander or Linus Karlsson last year that he played with over the last, I'd say 2 seasons that you could be like, oh, this is a possession-based, cycle-based, high danger chance player that he's working with. Because yes, Elias Pettersson is kind of unique where like off the rush, he's a facilitator. On the cycle, he's a finisher. Mm-hmm. Just because of how efficient he is. Even when he was genuinely probably a top 5 center in the NHL, there was about an 18-month stretch where I'd argue he was. He never dominated games where it was like, oh, look at his power game, how he's holding on to pucks. It was like, oh, look at this quick strike offense where like there's nothing going on and all of a sudden 1 pass, 2 pass back of the net. Quick strike, like just out of nowhere. And you could say, oh, that doesn't seem very sustainable. Then no, it is sustainable because the efficiency has always been there for Elias Pettersson. If we're looking at the draft coming up, Ivar Stenberg is a very efficient player too. Gavin McKenna is an efficient player on the perimeter where like the reason why he's going to go number 1 is because he's able to take plays that should be nothing and turns them into high, danger chances where, yes, he's a perimeter player. He doesn't play make from the slot, but the hardest place to create offense is from, the boards, the perimeter, and just when a team is set up defensively, he still finds a way to create offense. That's what Pettersson was doing. Think about all those Kuzmenko goals where like Pettersson would have the puck and he'd send it diagonally right to the back post, tap in. That's efficiency, and that's precision. And that's always kind of been what Elias Pettersson is. So when you're putting him in a situation where you're asking him to focus more on frequency and things like, oh, get pucks on, like that's never been his game. It doesn't make sense to me. Like I said, like I think Pettersson had a better year last year than he did under his last season with Talkie. It just looks worse because 1, the roster was worse, and 2, the team was worse. So it's, for me, it's like I'm going to let you know right now with how the roster is constructed. I'm not saying, oh, Pettersson rebound, he's going to be 90 points. I don't think there's a chance that happens. But if you told me, oh, everything went right for Elias Pettersson, not the team, but Elias Pettersson, and he got 80 points, I wouldn't be too surprised. If you told me that the median, if you told me the over-under for his points next season was 69.5, so like 70 or more, I would probably take the over, assuming that this roster, assuming there are a couple people on this roster like Besser, like Lekarmak, he actually gets proper ice time, and there is a competent structure, I see him being fine. Like there's not, like you said, he can't get much worse. Mm-hmm. Barring injury or barring for some reason he comes into camp, he could be in shape, but like he's like 215 pounds, tries to play like a power forward because he was throwing more hits, mm-hmm. right? Like there's that. Like I don't want him to play like that, and I don't know what Manny Malhotra's like analytic thinking is. From what I understand, he went in the AHL, he actually used to like have meetings with analytics staff and like say, okay, what's going on? And then he would try and translate that into player friendly rhetoric so that it didn't come off as like a computer, this computer said, but like he would position in ways where like he could make it come across more like, okay, I see this from an actual NHL and coaching perspective. Therefore, a player's going to listen to me more. And Manny Malhotra, and Pettersson have good rapport going back to even the Young Guns tournament in 2016 or 2017, where Pettersson, they were doing shootout practice, and Malhotra, after Pettersson scored his signature shootout goal from when he was, in Allsvenskan, Timra, or in Vecchia for the Lakers in SHL. Malhotra was like, "Oh, is that your normal move?" And Petey's like, "Yeah, that's my normal move." And he's like, "Wow, it's nasty." Like, just stuff like that. And you're building up that rapport like a decade ago. Mm-hmm. And we've heard that, like, oh, he hasn't had the best relationship with the Sedins. Just because they're Swedish does not mean that they would necessarily be friends. Like, I'm not friends with every Canadian I meet, and two, the Sedins were never in high-ranking positions. They were just player development. And by the time, Pettersson was, by the time the Sedins were in like an actual player development role, Pettersson was already developed. Mm-hmm. Like, they were more focused on Abbotsford. So there wasn't all that much. Like, of course, you should try and build that, build that rapport, but it was different times in their executive and player careers, respectively. I know for a fact that the Sedins want to work with Pettersson because if they're as analytically driven as I'm led to believe, that, they would understand the value in trying to rekindle Pettersson. Also, if they were to trade him now and then, for example, they come out and imagine it leaks somehow, even though they said they want to stop leaks. If it comes out and leaks and they're like, oh, they just didn't see a path to him coming back, well, then the Sedins would be hypocrites. Mm-hmm. Do we not remember how old they were when they actually broke out? Yes, I understand that they started breaking out after, the lockout, and there was different rules and stuff, but they were like 26, 27 years old. Mm-hmm. It would be massively hypocritical to, just say, this player is not going to be anything after he had a better start to his career than both of you. Like, even his first season was, I think he had more points than both Sedins. It wouldn't surprise me if he had more points than both of them combined. I think Daniel's rookie season, he had 20 goals, 9 assists. And then Hronek had probably 11 goals and 22 assists or something like that. Like, it's, PD had 66 points, and I want to say it was 72, 73 games.
Yeah.
He was always a 66 point player. There was a weird stretch where he was 66 or 67 points. Didn't matter what the games played. And then he had 102 points and then 89 points after the knee tendonitis thing that the team said wasn't true and then had to admit was true. Like, there's so much stuff where it's like, oh, you could say, oh, Pettersson's lazy, blah, blah, but you have to put some blame on this organization too. They've admitted that they lied. They've admitted that they don't have the resources for a lot of things. There's just so much where it's like, okay, why aren't people willing to accept that this is a two-way street? Pettersson, I think, deserves a chance under competent coaching, under competent management, under modern non-caveman era management, and just let him feel some love again. Like, I don't want him being announced on opening night if he's still a Canuck getting booed. Like, we gotta, we can't be doing that. Like, Malhotra, it does have his work cut out for him with PD, but also the organization has work cut out with themselves. They have to, it should have already been going on. And by the way, as we're discussing, it turns out Thatcher Demko stepped foot on the ice today for the first time since getting his hip surgery. They should, at the very least, if Brian Johnson is as smart as I've been led to believe, he should have had a conversation with Petey saying, hey, we tried this under different coaches. I've spoken to Manny because you can't convince me that Manny didn't know way beforehand that he was going to be coach. I don't care what the search was. It's just, come on, you can't tell me they weren't in the AHL being like, well, one day when I take over, especially after the Calder Cup win, that, they had to have come up to a consensus where it's like, okay, what if we just let him be who he was, not just on the ice, but off the ice too, let him be the guy who posts on Instagram. He was pretty good when he did that, let him be the 176-pound player, because I just saw Nikita Kucherov win the Hart Trophy, and he's, I think, listed at 163, 5'11". Aho, I don't think, is in the 200-pound range, and he's 5'11". I want to say he's 100 and maybe 190, 180 pounds or something. Logan Stankoven's 5'8". Jackson Blake is not that big. Nick Ehlers is 6', 161, I think. Just let him be Petey. Like, I wouldn't go up to Henrik and Daniel Sedin and tell them to be shot blockers. My name's not John Tortorella. I feel like there was just so much thought of, like, if you're going to be a number one center, you have to be someone different. And it's like, no, actually, you as a coach or you as management need to think different. Because now we're seeing in Philadelphia, I know they just made the second round, but I'm going to let you know right now, Chief, that ain't happening again unless Dan Vladar stands on his head again. There's a reason why that man got Hart votes. There's a reason, or Vezina votes. Like, he got both, actually. There's a reason for it, and it wasn't like Tocchet's system. And after he had that talk with DeBoer during the Olympic break, yeah, it was heavy rush offense. What happened when they made it to the playoffs? Even against Pittsburgh, they were able to outspeed, and that's what Tocchet's structure is actually good against. It's good against slow teams. As soon as they, even against them, they couldn't generate off the rush. Couldn't generate off the rush against Carolina. And they've just signed Dvorak, and they want to move Zegras to the wing, and it's like, cool. But now your top two centers are an older Sean Couturier and Dvorak. And it's like, this isn't going to be repeatable again. Nope. So I think it's more of a case of trying to get, and we can talk about Adam Foote as well, where, like, I think the style he had for the team last year was genuinely dead puck era hockey. But you can't do the dead puck era hockey stuff without taking like a million penalties, because back when Foote played, you could hook the guy and basically just literally like hook him and pull him towards you. You can't do that now. So the man structure was completely different. Players look lost. I was told by someone who is as close to the organization as you can be without actually being within the organization, that Adam Foote would count cross checks in practice and tell them to focus on the body instead of tying up sticks in front. Go back and watch some of the highlights, and if you notice the deflection goals in front, now you know why, because they were being told to cross-check players in front and take away the body. When I was watching preseason and I saw David Tomasek from the Oilers sitting on the back post and the Canucks penalty kill, letting it happen, that back post play, that diagonal, what PD and Miller used to do to Kuzmenko all the time, play being left there, to me, I was like, oh, they just expect, Demko to just save that because he's Demko. Like, take away everything else and leave the most high danger chance. And if Demko can predict it, he'll save it. Like, that's just not true, because the players in the NHL are better than ever, and they're just going to pick that apart. Like, it was basically just dead puck era hockey. It wasn't good. So for many years, there just hasn't been any forward thinking in coaching, in management. They apparently weren't listening to the analytic staff they did have. So why shouldn't I be willing to give Pettersson one more year under potentially a more modern, forward-thinking front office and coaching staff?
Yeah, like, I mean, Adam Foote's the reason I had to start wearing this on stream. So just wearing the bag on my head because it was so bad. We've got the winless streak on the one side. We've got the losing streak on the other side. You can see it's been torn up because they did eventually break that streak. Yeah. But then I realized it didn't matter, so I had to take the thing back together and put it back on my head because it was just, we haven't talked about Adam Foote in a while, but is Adam Foote the worst coach the Canucks have ever had?
When you account for the fact that the game has changed from like pure nepotism and like who within the sport to like at least, a lot of teams are now starting to do more analytical hires and stuff. I think when you put it into the context of how the league has gone and how other teams have done stuff, definitely the worst coach in club history who has gotten a full season.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think LaGrange might be the worst. I think that was his name. Would have been the worst. I think LaForge, sorry. Yeah, I think LaGrange is actually a baseball or basketball coach. But LaForge, I think he was 3-16 or something.
Yeah.
Like, he just, no.
Yeah, Bill LaForge.
The Forge, yeah. So not great. 4-14-2. I just looked it up. 4-14-2. Hired at just 33 years old with zero NHL coaching experience. He brought amateur volatile tactics to the pros, once reportedly forcing players to run a physical gauntlet against the boards in practice. This drill ultimately ended Darcy Rota's career due to a back injury. Yeah, like that's 1984. Baseball was just coming into its sabermetrics era. I believe the Orioles manager had started doing like more like on base stuff, but it was very primitive. Hockey hadn't gotten there yet at all. When you take into account the advances that other teams have made and other leagues have made, yeah, I would argue that Adam Foote's the worst. Look at his WHL coaching record. Like people wanted to say, oh, that Kelowna team wasn't really good. Could it be that maybe their development was ruined by him being there for a year? Potentially. It's for me, like, and a lot of people like to prop up Rick Tocchet. Rick Tocchet, I think, is just he's a couple steps above Adam Foote. But I think they're firmly in that like fantastic assistant, not great head coach category. And this is actually I mentioned it way earlier where like Drance and I have difference in opinion. Drance actually thinks that Tocchet is a good head coach. I disagree because I feel like the low event style is too volatile and can lead to too many instances of you getting dominated by an opponent to the point where you can't come back. Meanwhile, with Drance, he's more of the belief that like if you can keep the game low event 5-on-5 and then take advantage on the special teams, that's a good spot to be in too. And there is like, yes, there is reasoning to back up, to back up both. But I don't think there's anything you look at with Adam Foote and say, yeah, he did this well. They had a good power play, but was that him or was that Brett McLean or the players on the ice? Because it did seem like late in the season they just started doing everything that that they weren't doing before. It felt borderline revoltish on the power play. Where like, because like down the stretch, I think they had. I know they actually their expected goals per 60 on the penalty kill was higher than their expected goals per 60 on the power play and 5v5. Crazy, by the way. Yeah, but like actual power play percentage from the trade deadline on, they were one of the best teams in the NHL, and they were using more cross ice plays. That game against Colorado where they won 8-6, Pedersen was doing that pass they used to do to Kuzmenko that I've mentioned a couple times. He was doing it to DeBrusk. DeBrusk scored a goal. There was a bunch of stuff like that where I was like, oh, these guys are just like, yeah, we're NHL, we're skilled players. Let's just do what skilled players do. Yeah, it's just, I don't feel like there's anything you look at with Adam Foote and be like, oh yeah, that's great. Like, I think he's just a vibes guy. And I think he's from what I hear, he's like a very personable person to be around, like within that locker room, which is nice. Can't be your head tactician. Can't be the head, like I said with Talkie, can't be the head guy in the kitchen. Can't be the head chef because he's going to season it to his preference way too much, and the rest of the populace is not going to like it. So yeah, like let's have some guy with like actual a coaching resume, championship resume. He has that. Manuel Holter has that championship as a head coach. Tocchet never had until he was head coach in Tampa. He never had a head coaching experience ever. Like he was assistant coach. He was actually assistant coach during the Steve Moore incident for Colorado. Like you watch that footage back. I was watching it back last year, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's Rick Tocchet behind the bench. Oh, what the heck? Very weird. But then yeah, he was head coach in Tampa. That didn't really go well. Head coach in Arizona didn't really go well. Besides, when Darcy Kemper bailed him out during the bubble. Yeah, like it's just, let's see a guy with like actual head coaching pedigree. Yes, it's an AHL title, but head coaching pedigree. And then he's also been a very successful assistant coach for Toronto and Vancouver. It's more appealing. So there's just, yeah, Adam Foote is just crazy to me because they did it to keep Hughes, but if what we know to be true is true, they knew he was gone. So why not just they should have brought in Manny last year, unless they really were just like, okay, let's force a rebuild. Like, I don't know. It almost felt like sabotage in a way. But now Adam Foote is reportedly one of the highest paid assistant coaches in the NHL with Utah. for another coach that I actually think is pretty bad in Tournier. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I'm not the best at French pronunciations. I didn't even take it in grade 8. I was in an organizational class because I was a messy boy.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I don't know. I think stay as an assistant coach, know where you fit in. Don't bite on more than you can chew.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been an interesting couple of years for the Canucks, and if I'll give anything to Rutherford, you can say everything about him. There are a couple things I'll give to Rutherford. He always had a backup plan. There was always Rutherford never had one thing he was trying to do. He always had at least 2 or 3 layers of a plan. And the other thing I'll give to him is he's the only executive in the history of the Canucks that has gotten this team to rebuild. So if there's anything we can give him is that he is the only one that has managed to convince this ownership group, whether it turns out as we want it to, because it is still the same ownership group, this is the only one that have gotten one of the Aquilinis to come into a press conference and use the R word rebuild, right? So here we are, I've defended Rutherford in some ways over his tenure with the Canucks because I think there was a lot that happened with this franchise that was outside of his control, but he wasn't perfect, but he did get the rebuild. But yeah, I mean, that's my tinfoil theory, right? Adam Foote on any other team would have been fired, right? He never coached a full season in the WHL. He had 54 games in both seasons. He came in to replace a coach, and then he was fired in a year that they were hosting the Memorial Cup, which is extra crazy. The numbers of the team were a disaster when he was down there. There was absolutely no reason he should have been a head coach. So I think he was brought in specifically as tank commander. So Adam Foote, worst coach in the history of the team, the best tank commander, and we'll give Rutherford at least the trophy for getting the Aquilinis to rebuild.
This is more of a funny, like satirical question, but do you think any of, because apparently what convinced them was that they'd spend less on player payroll.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think any other management group who wanted to do a rebuild, because apparently Gillis wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Benning did or if he was truly just like a 7-year puppet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Do you think any of them thought to just be like, hey, you'll spend less money on payroll, right? Or was Rutherford the first guy? And another thing, do you think Rutherford just, because if that is what convinced Aquilini, do you think Rutherford would have said it had he not had a good inkling that he was going to retire? Like, for example, imagine Rutherford's like 60 and he still thinks he has 15 years to go. Mm. Do you think he says that? Or do you think he's like, I want to stay on, like, I want to keep my job, so I just won't say that?
I think
because to me,
Rutherford was just like, I'm out of here. I know I'm not going to be here. I'm going to retire. I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. I'm sure there was meetings where Rutherford got in trouble from the Aquilinis for what he was doing with the team. And I don't think Rutherford gave 2 shits about it because he knew he was going to be gone anyways.
Yeah, yeah, like, it always kind of was weird to me that it had come out like he was the one who was like, no, we need to extend Pettersson. But if it came from like Aquilini, because apparently Aquilini has been a Pettersson fan, that would make more sense. And like Rutherford talking through there, like through him. But then once he realized, I'm retiring, just completely being like, you know what? I'm going to show my true colors. That would be funny. I would respect him more. And I know he's still under contract as a senior advisor, which is actually why I think some of the leaks are still coming out. I don't think it's the Sedins. I actually think it's Rutherford because he has a blabbermouth. And also, by the way, thank goodness Dale Talon is out of the organization. I'll bring that up. Yeah, like it's kind of funny. I do worry about their ability to spend, because I know they have that massive buyout of the brother Paolo. That is, the rumor is it could be like $500 million to $800 million. Mm-hmm. I do worry that like when this team is ready to eventually turn it around, if they get to that point, that they will not be able to spend at $160 to $180 million cap, especially because that cap is USD. So, and they make their revenues in Canadian. Mm-hmm. So I feel like we're getting to a point, and especially I've heard that once Luigi passes away, that estate is going to be held up in a lot of different lawsuits between the family, which will likely lead to them needing to sell. But I don't think just because of their empire, they want to sell Rogers Arena. But also, even though with the renovations, Rogers Arena is kind of dilapidated. Like I think it's the 7th oldest arena, about to be 6th once Calgary opens. Which also, I think Calgary's arena opening is why they traded for Nemec yesterday, because they're getting ready to accelerate that for no reason. But they're going to need to build a new arena at some point in the next 10 years. I wonder if they just sell the team when that becomes abundantly clear, with the caveat of like, okay, we'll sell the team to you, but Aquilini development has like, because I think when they do build a new arena, they're going to go that route of like, oh, we need the sports entertainment complex. It'll be hard to do because downtown Vancouver doesn't have a lot of land, but I'm pretty confident that there are going to be owners of some of those buildings that are like, if we can get restaurant districts and other things in there, like we can bring in a bunch of different business owners. I wouldn't be surprised if like a contingency of an Aquilini sell is, okay, you're going to build the new arena, you're going to buy the Rogers Arena land from us as well on top of that, and we're going to be the lead developers for the sports complex. We won't own the Canucks anymore, but we are going to be the lead developers and like overlords of this sports complex, and that's how they're going to move from the Canucks based revenue to this new sporting complex. That's probably, you know, if the Whitecaps stick around, we'll probably include the Whitecaps. It'll include the BC Lions. Oh, my cat's meowing. The Canucks, and you know, potentially one day an MLB team or whatever. Like, I think that is the route they're going, and I'm saying that without, like, my dad was one who gave me that idea, and the more I think about it, the more I'm like, with how the Aquilinis want to spend and where the cap's going, it actually kind of makes a little bit of sense, especially with, you know, they're developers, right? Like, that's kind of what they do. Feels like we could be heading into a world, and I want to say by 2035, 2040, assuming, because I think Luigi Aquilini is like 84, 86. If he passes away, that we could see a Canucks sell, and then hopefully the next owner is competent. Yeah, that's what gives me hope. You know, like I think as a fan, like, fandom is irrational. That's why a lot of people have stuck by the Canucks even through this ownership group. And the reason why it's irrational is because it's from the heart. Like, it's not a lot of brain, it's a lot of heart, and like that feeling of like community and like home, right? Even though like the players don't know who you are, right? Like, I've been inside the locker room, players don't know who I am, right? So yeah, like, the reason why they've stuck through is because they want to see a winner, even if it seems irrational. The hope for fans is that eventually the Aquilinis are going to have to sell, and there's going to be an owner who comes in, you know, even if that billionaire isn't a good person on paper. And I know people that's like a debate that goes on, like, oh, are billionaires good people or whatever, but it's like, can they actually run the Canucks like a proper business? Understand that, you know, you got to spend money to make money, willing to put in the resources, and, you know, creating a team that Vancouver can be proud of. Because at the end of the day, the Sabres and the Canucks hold the NHL record for the longest period from inception of franchise to first Stanley Cup. They will hold that. Like, yes, the Leafs have the longer, you know, streak, but the Canucks and the Sabres are the oldest teams to have never won a cup in history of the sport. So it's got to have, like, and this is where analytics comes in. Statistically, it's got to happen before I pass away. I feel bad for, like, my dad is in his early 50s. I couldn't imagine cheering for a team for that long and not seeing a championship. I know the Chicago Cubs went over 100, or it was over 100 years. I think it was 103, 104 years without a title. Statistically, I mean, life expectancy in Canada is for males is 79. That'll be 2080. 104 years for the Canucks will be 2074. So the odds say that I'll see at least one cup.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's crazy. Like, and I'm not even, like, part of the Aquilini incompetence is what drove me into going to sports management. Because it was like, I'm sick of complaining about the team all the time. I might as well go to school and see if I can make a difference somehow. Like, it's about actually taking action, right? So yeah, like I don't know, like sometimes when like I talk about like, oh, what is the Canucks going to do during this rebuild, it feels kind of fruitless or like a waste of time, because I do worry about how, will the Aquilinis eventually meddle and be like, you got to accelerate this? Mm-hmm. Or will they be willing to put in the resources when things turn around if they don't sell? But at the end of the day, I know eventually there's going to be new owners. Like I know Dax Aquilini is kind of like gearing up to be the next guy. Mm-hmm. There's going to be new owners. I truly think within the next 11 to 15 years. It's the luck's got to change eventually. It really does.
Yeah, I think it's gotten to a point with sports franchise where individual owners, like family owners, is just a thing that's going to be a thing in the past. You're not going to have one individual or one family that can run any. No. When you're getting to this point with the NHL, which is one of the lowest, size financially when it comes to professional sports in North America, like it's one of the smaller leagues when it comes to revenues and the amount of money it takes to run. Yeah, it's now going to be corporations. It's going to be conglomerates. It's going to be funds that are going to be running these teams. So I think I totally agree with you that their reign of terror will end eventually. I think.
Well, they were almost like the NHL and the NBA were neck and neck. I think there was an article where I think it was Bure getting robbed by Richter on the front cover of some sports magazine, where it's like the NHL is hot, the NBA is not. Like they were that close, and the NBA recognized where they needed to make changes really quick and started moving away from those family owners, and they got more revenues in. And the NHL just sat back because they are more traditional. They wanted to be more traditional and stuff. I think there's still in the NHL bylaws, rules like preventing like hedge funds, for example, from buying teams, or like multi-corporation owners from owning teams. Like there's weird, they still want like individuals, like for example, Andlauer, Michael Andlauer, I believe is the guy who bought the Senators. He had part ownership of the Canadiens before he owned the Sens, but he had a lot of like I think he had something to do with the hedge fund, but he bought as an individual, right? So we haven't really seen, like, for example, I'm just trying to think of a company, SpaceX, like, have they, like, we haven't seen that type of, like, Walmart or something buy an NHL team. People thought that maybe Bezos would buy the Kraken. Instead, he just got the Amazon owns the naming rights, and then they called it Climate Pledge Arena. And then they have the Amazon supermarket, I think, inside Climate Pledge Arena too. So they got some of that. But like once that starts happening, the Aquilins are going to be left behind, and it's going to get to the point where like I think it would be so funny, and it would be the result of more like a decade more of pain for us. Like it would get worse, but like eventually they're just like, we had to sell the team because we couldn't even hit the cap floor. Yeah, like that would be kind of funny, even though it would put years on my life due to stress and anger.
Sapsterr, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and chat with us here on Nothing is Perfect on the podcast. For everyone who's listening and watching right now, what is the best way for them to find your content?
You can find my content on Twitter. I'm Sapsterr, Sapsterr. It's 2 R's because the one with 1 R got stolen as a gamer tag on Xbox. Hockeybysap.blog. You can either just do the .blog, go directly to my blog, or you can go through my Twitter to hockeybysap.substack.com, which is where I found out that people use Substack, so I decided to just paste articles from the blog that I bought the domain name for, and just move it to Substack, which turns out I wouldn't have had to pay a domain name for. And I do think there will be bigger things for me maybe in the future. I don't know exactly when, but perhaps my name will be more out there than you know. And if you ever match me on NHL, whether it's NHL 26 or NHL 27 on Xbox or whatever, you can always shoot me a message and call me whatever name you want to, because that's what people do anyways. So, but I appreciate being on this. It's, I believe, the second podcast I've ever been on as like a Canuck content creator, I guess. The first one being the Nuckhead podcast. So this is like a unique opportunity for me. So even if you want to thank me for joining, I have to thank you for giving me the opportunity, and I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all the viewers, and subscribe. You know, I see that you're very close to 2,400 subscribers. Get them up to 2,500, because a quarter of 10,000 is actually it's a big milestone for smaller creators. I have a YouTube channel as well. Mine was more focused on NHL video game content. I only post a couple videos a year because I only really think there's a couple videos a year to post, and I'm around the same number as you, so I know how big that number is and how good that feels. And also the hockey community, it needs more people talking about it. It needs more authorities on the game, because how else are we going to grow the sport? So Russell, I really appreciate the opportunity to do this, and I hope the viewers enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed talking to me, and I hope to be back on soon.
Nothing is perfect.